March Madness is upon us. What a crazy beginning of March Madness we've had through the round of 64, and even now through some of the round of 32 as we advance into the Sweet 16. And I thought right now is a great time to have another NBA mock draft on the channel. Thanks for all the patience on the channel this week. I know there was less uploads than typical. I was a little bit under the weather this past week, so I'm excited to be back. I watched a lot of NCAA basketball over the last couple days here as well while I was kind of rehabbing back to full health and getting ready to record some more videos. So I'm excited to be back, and we're going to start here with a lottery simulation again, which I'm really excited about. I know some people say, oh, this lottery doesn't, simulate very well. They, kind of hate on Tankathon a little bit, and I understand sometimes it's not the most accurate, most realistic. The whole point of it, though, is to have a little bit of fun, look at some potential outcomes that could happen, and talk about some teams that maybe would be at the top of the lottery that, all year long we haven't had the opportunity to talk about. So let's see who gets the first overall pick here. And it's the New Orleans Pelicans, actually, via the Los Angeles Lakers. What a crazy turn of events, but something that is a possibility. If we look at their odds here to secure the first overall pick, it is 2%. That's 4 times more likely than the Bulls were to get the first overall pick that became Derrick Rose. The Rockets are picking second in this one. Washington picks third, and Orlando picks fourth. I think the one thing, too, about this as we go through is the first overall pick, I think, is very clear on who the first overall selection should be in Victor Wembanyama. So, it doesn't really change depending on what team's picking first. So keep that in mind. Let's say if Houston or Detroit or San Antonio or Charlotte had the first pick, we all know they would select Victor Wembanyama. So it doesn't really change anything for us. But let's jump into the actual mock draft portion now of this video. Just a reminder too, make sure to smash that like button and also subscribe to the channel. Without further ado, here we are in the actual mock draft portion now of this video. First overall, the New Orleans Pelicans are on the clock. This pick comes from the Los Angeles Lakers, which is a nightmare situation for the Lakers, obviously from that Anthony Davis trade. That maybe their pick does end up becoming Victor Wembanyama playing in New Orleans, which would become the beginning of the end probably for a lot of other teams, assuming health, which is something you can't really assume for New Orleans with how Zion Williamson has missed so many games already early in his career, which was one of the big red flags on him as a draft prospect, which is why I argued that John Morant should have been the first overall pick. I was one of the few, maybe only people on the planet that actually believed that at the time. Obviously, John Morant's got his own stuff going on right now, though, too. But, given the amount of games Ja's played in comparison to Zion, there's some legitimacy to that. But now you look at the situation here where New Orleans could maybe add Victor Wembanyama, where, again, the only concern would maybe be longevity and long-term health. And Victor Wembanyama, in my opinion, is the best prospect to have ever walked on the face of the earth. You look at, other guys who've maybe been in that realm, LeBron James, Tim Duncan, Hakeem Olajuwon, maybe, Yao Ming, obviously, garnered some love as well with his size. But Wembanyama is a completely different type of player with his frame, mobility, athletic capabilities, his standing reach, his wingspan. There's just plays that he makes that I've never seen any other player really be able to make. He's blocking shots on the other side of the rim. He just does alien type things. I've got actually a really fun video scheduled at some point relatively soon for Victor Wembanyama. It's going to be something you guys have not seen on YouTube anywhere. I'm really excited for that video, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on something like that. First overall pick, it's really a no-brainer here. Whoever has the pick, they walk up to the podium and draft Victor Wembanyama. There's no questions asked about it. He's the best prospect I've ever evaluated. I was really, really high on Luka Doncic before he came into the league. That was a little bit before my time starting, draft analysis here on YouTube. But, in terms of prospect, if Wembanyama was in the same class as Luka, I would have preferred Wembanyama. And, does that mean his career plays out that way? Possibly not, right? But no one who has the first overall pick, all 30 teams would take Wembanyama first overall. There's no conversation here. There's no questions asked about this pick. So let's get into the next one. Second overall, the Houston Rockets here now. And this is where there's some actual questions about who is the second overall pick. Beginning of the year, it was, okay, first overall is Wembanyama, second overall is Scoot Henderson. But there's a lot of people and a lot of noise right now about, wow, NBA executives, scouts start to prefer Brandon Miller second overall over Scoot Henderson in this year's draft. You heard Jonathan Givony talking about it, who I think is some of his work is very good. I think some of his work is kind of disconnected from the league, to be honest. Second overall, Scoot Henderson is the selection. I'm sorry. I don't care that he's 6'2". To be honest, with his skill set, I wouldn't really care if he's 5'11". I get, there's less 6'8" wings who can handle the ball and do some stuff. Okay, that you could have argued the same thing about Michael Beasley being drafted over Derrick Rose. Beasley was way bigger, stronger, had way better college film, arguably as well. Scoot Henderson's got the better NBA game. He's going to adjust to the NBA better. He's playing against actual pro athletes this season, unlike Brandon Miller. And he also doesn't have some, serious concerns off the court surrounding him. Now, I know Scoot Henderson's missed some time this year. He had a kind of weird facial injury where he ended up missing some time due to concussion protocol, those kind of things. But there's a scouting profile on the channel here on Scoot Henderson. If you have questions about why this guy's the second overall pick, you need to go watch that video. He's the most advanced passer in this year's draft. He is not just about passing the ball. He actually uses his body to put himself into positions to open up certain passing angles, certain passing lanes. He understands the nuances of defense at the professional level. He's the second overall pick. Houston here, there's no question asked about it. They need Scoot Henderson. They do not have any semblance of consistent offense right now. Jalen Green would love the opportunity to play with a guy like Scoot Henderson because he wouldn't lead the league in time shooting sub 40% from the field. I mean, Scoot Henderson's going to help a ton of players in his career. He's going to be an assist guru. He's going to be able to lead an offense. And those are all things Houston really badly needs right now. Third overall, we have the Washington Wizards. And, it's kind of funny that this team used to be the Washington Bullets because Brandon Miller's going to fit right in here for a few different reasons. Tommy Shepard loves to draft successful collegiate players. And Brandon Miller has been the kind of prototype, wow, this has been the best player in all of college this year. And I know we're in the time of the year in March where the college players have all the buzz, and that's why Brandon Miller's stealing some of that shine for, should he be the second overall pick? To be honest with you, I really still think he should not be. I think that at highest, he should be drafted third overall. That is assuming everything continues to clear him from all investigations, everything surrounding the issues, obviously, that have been very well documented up to this point. I talked about it as well in a video on a scouting profile on Brandon Miller. I do think Brandon Miller is a very good player. I know I'm coming across a little bit more negative on him. That's because all I'm hearing right now is, Brandon Miller's got all this buzz and he should be moving up draft boards. And third overall is very high for where people felt like Brandon Miller maybe would have been to start the year. We just can't forget that Scoot Henderson is as good as Scoot Henderson is. Like, before the year, Scoot Henderson, people were wondering if in that game against Mets 92, if he could have maybe made a push to being the first overall pick, obviously before everything kind of went, the way it did, and Victor Wembanyama impressed the way that he did. But I still think a guy like Brandon Miller's a really good prospect. I think he would help Washington a ton. I think the Wizards need a facelift on their organization. I think Brandon Miller would be a really nice addition for them. I think he's less of a sure thing, though, than Scoot Henderson, which is why I mock him here third overall instead of second. Then we have Orlando picking fourth. They actually have the 4th and 11th pick in this year's draft, and 4th in this mock draft here. They're looking at Amen Thompson from Overtime Elite, which is one of the harder leagues to actually evaluate players from. A lot of Amen Thompson's success this year came in transition. Transition opportunities were really, really, vital for his statistical success. He did a lot of great things in transition, which I don't want to knock as this is a big red flag concern I have for this guy. So I do think he can be a very good NBA player at some point. Now, I do think it's going to take a little bit more time than a lot of people are expecting. He's a 20-year-old who is just playing like high school, college level basketball, basically. He's not going to step in on day one of the NBA and be a build-around go-to player, but I think the potential is going to be there that by the end of year one of his career, we see some of that where we say, wow, could this guy be a foundational piece? And I think the answer to that is yes. Kind of funny enough, you think about a comparison. He's bigger, more athletic than Jalen Suggs, but I think their, play style was fairly similar in terms of how they score the ball as downhill kind of attackers, specifically in transition. But Amen Thompson's bigger, more athletic. He's a much better facilitator as well. And that's really where the, reasoning for him being a top 4, top 5 pick in this year's draft makes a ton of sense. he's very capable of facilitating the basketball. He's a very advanced lob thrower already at this point, which you might say, oh, that's not a big of a deal. It is. The fact that he's able to put passes vertically in the air on time, on target to be finished is a very impressive trait for a 20-year-old basketball player. And I think it's going to help him adjust to the NBA very quickly, especially playing there in Orlando with lob threats like Paolo Banchero, who obviously had a really nice rookie season for himself. But you also look at some of the other guys there in Orlando who can finish over the top. Franz Wagner is a very nice cutter as well. Obviously something that most Michigan players are pretty good at. I think Amen Thompson is kind of the missing piece that Orlando could really look to use and add into their lineup. And it gives them a really fun switchable lineup of a 6'7" guard who, could play next to a Jalen Suggs. Now, I think the one big concern is, what does the shooting look like in that backcourt with Fultz, Suggs? You have obviously Cole Anthony still at this point. And then Amen Thompson, I think, most teams are going to say sag off. But with Amen Thompson's passing capability, do you really want to sag off a guy who can throw some pinpoint passes and kind of orchestrate an offense? And I think that's where there's some red flags for me with how do you guard Orlando. So for Amen Thompson, I think there's a lot of benefits to him going here. Now, I think this team still needs a lot of shooting. But, Amen Thompson, 4th overall, is a very good addition. Then we go into our very next pick here, which is 5th overall to the Detroit Pistons. And I like what this team has as of right now. Jalen Duren's had an awesome rookie season. I'm still very high on Jaden Ivey. I think that he's still a very good, intriguing young player who can create advantages with his athleticism, his speed off the bounce specifically. Cade Cunningham, his eventual return to the lineup next season will help this team a lot as well. Just going to Cade Cunningham instead of Killian Hayes as your starting point guard means a world of difference, whether you're winning or losing games in the NBA. But here, Ausar Thompson becomes a really nice addition for them, especially in a year where they traded away Saddiq Bey and kind of opened a big hole at their wing position. Ausar Thompson is the brother of Amen Thompson and has very similar athletic capabilities. About 6'7" as well. He's got nice athleticism. He's extremely quick, a ton of burst vertically as well. He's been kind of one of those guys who's finished a ton of lobs that Amen Thompson's actually throwing in his time playing for the City Reapers for Overtime Elite. And I think Ausar is going to be a very fun player to watch in the NBA, not only because of his athletic capabilities, but I also think he's really grown a lot as an offensive player in the last year or so, specifically his ability off the bounce. He's improved as a playmaker. He's taken some steps forward as a shot maker, which has been really the biggest thing I've noticed, specifically in the Overtime Elite Finals. He actually shot 38% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. So that's a very big step up in the right direction. Now, it was a very small sample size in terms of the amount of games that lasted for, but even if he comes anywhere close to that at the NBA level, it's a ginormous win for him as a developmental piece and as a player who can probably stick around long term. I think when it comes to point of attack defense, he's got one of the higher upsides in this class on that end of the floor because of that athleticism, that general frame at 6'7", and the length that he presents as well. That's kind of the trio, the combination you're looking for from a point of attack defender. And Detroit gets a really nice player here with a ton of upside to fit their already good, solid young core. I think that they're a team to really watch for going forward into the future. Pick 6, San Antonio on the board now. The Spurs, a team that I do think when all things are said and done, I think that they're going to be picking very high in this year's draft. So 6th overall, probably not where Spurs fans want to see them in this mock draft, but San Antonio, I have a good feeling about where you guys are going to be drafting this year, just based on, not any insider information, but my understanding of how this draft lottery is likely going to work. And 6th overall, if they're here, I have them taking Jarace Walker, who's had a very nice freshman season for the Houston Cougars, a team that's looking to make a ton of noise this March, and hopefully playing into April, honestly, with the expectations on that program. They've had a very awesome season, and Jarace Walker himself has been very, very fantastic. He had 6 blocks in the round of 32, pushing them into a Sweet 16 berth, and he's been, just incredible offensively and defensively this year. I think defensively was one of those areas where I wasn't sure what to expect from him as a freshman. After, viewing his high school film, I spent a lot of time watching the guys well before they get to college so that I'm, prepared to talk about them for an hour-long video as frequently as I do. And Jarace Walker is a guy who offensively, the skill set was there. He can step out, knock down a 3-point shot. He's able to play with his back to the basket, which is one of his stronger offensive elements. But he's also really shown some more fluidity with the ball in his hands than I was expecting this year for Houston, which is why you see him as high as 6 now in my most recent mock draft, whereas typically he'd been kind of hovering a little bit closer to 10. I just think his overall body of work's been very strong, and he's had some really good defensive moments paired with the offensive versatility that he has. I'd be surprised to see him go outside of the top 7 with how this year's draft is seemingly shaking out at this point. Pick number 7, the Charlotte Hornets here now. And with the Hornets on the board, this is a tough spot for them to be in because they've been really bad this year. Obviously, LaMelo Ball's missed so much time this season as well. Hoping that he can come back next season healthy. But the Hornets, the Miles Bridges situation, everything was kind of set up for failure. This year, Steve Clifford was a terrible hire, in my opinion. But there is one nice silver lining here, and that's adding Cam Whitmore into the fold, a guy who last year carried Team USA in the summer in, overseas FIBA play. He's a very good young player, and I think Villanova didn't have the year they were hoping to this year. Cam Whitmore didn't have the year he was hoping to this year. I think there would have been more buzz about him maybe being a top 4, top 5 pick if he would have played the way I think a lot of people assume he's capable of. But I think there's a ton of flashes still in his game that make you pretty confident that he's going to become what he should be, which is a dynamic downhill attacker with the ability to knock down some perimeter shots. He's got the perfect frame for being a good quality wing defender. Now, I think that he lacks a little bit of concentration focus on that end of the court, but a lot of 19-year-old, freshmen in college do. So I still think there's a lot of room for him to grow on both ends of the court. I think Charlotte needs an athletic, physical type like him who can, rip the rim off the backboard. At given moments of the game, that's really one of his best areas is dunking the basketball. And, it might sound, oh, well, if that's your greatest skill, how great is that? There's a way that he can set himself up to get there. He drives very well. He blows by defenders consistently, especially against closeouts. And he's got a nice, strong physical body where he doesn't really get bumped off of his line either when attacking the rim. So I think there's a lot of positives about Cam Whitmore. Now, I think that he still needs a ways to go in terms of being a 15 to 18 to 20 point per game scorer that I think he could become at the NBA level, but there's a ton of potential here, and he's already got a pretty good start with his physical frame. So I think year 1 he could be productive, but year 2, year 3 of his career was when we really probably see what he can really become in the NBA. Pick 8, the Portland Trailblazers here now, and Portland's one of my favorite teams to talk about in the draft cycle, specifically with their hire of Mike Schmitz as an assistant GM. I know his work very well. I've spent a lot of time, listening to Mike Schmitz talk in the past, just because as he was one of the few people that I've actually trusted in terms of his own draft evaluation and, kind of counter looking at what I'm saying versus what he's seeing. And typically, I follow my own gut. I don't, really change what I think too much, but it's interesting listening to him. And now that he's not in media anymore, it's really interesting going back and looking at what he had to say. Last year, I remember he really liked Shaedon Sharpe before the draft, and then Portland hired him, and well, Shaedon Sharpe ended up in Portland. So I think his influence is very important there. And I think a guy like Anthony Black does have a lot of intrigue for him. Anthony Black is one of my favorite players in this year's draft, if not my favorite player, honestly. Anthony Black is, I think, honestly, there's a good argument that he could be the most instinctful, most reactive passer in this year's draft, especially with the ability to fit passes into very tight windows. And honestly, when you're watching on the broadcast, there's times where he fits a pass in a window that you didn't even think existed. And I really think that once you get him into an NBA court, he's going to be so much better. Not only because the court's bigger, there's naturally more spacing, but right now he's playing for an Arkansas team that really cannot shoot the basketball. Arkansas does not shoot the ball at all right now, basically. Ricky Council, Nick Smith Jr., Jordan Walsh. I mean, this whole team does not really shoot a lot of threes. So because of that, a player like him who is kind of a drive and kick, play out of the pick and roll and spread offense type of point guard, well, it's kind of tough for him to have success, and he's still finding success, which is why I think he's a very good player. And I think now you put him in Portland next to some offensive, juggernauts like Anthony Simons, Damian Lillard, there's a lot of upside here. Plus, he's 6'7". He's a good point of attack defender. I think he's going to be a very smart team defender as well, which is important. I know people are going to say, oh, Portland doesn't need a guard. They shouldn't take Anthony Black. They need a center. Don't reach on a center at 8. Take the best player. Anthony Black, in my opinion, is the best player available at this point. He's a very good fit, I think, next to either of their two guards. I really think at their best, Portland's going to realize that they need to play a bigger guard next to Dame, bring Anthony Simons off the bench, play both of them 33, 34, 35 minutes a night, starters minutes, but you need to have another guard in there at all times with one of them. Which, you think about it, if both of them are playing 33 minutes a night, 15 minutes of Anthony Black next to Simons, 15 minutes of Anthony Black next to Damian Lillard, there you have 3 guards playing 30 plus minutes, fills out your entire guard rotation, and you have 3 really good ones playing all the time. I love it for Portland. I really do. I think Anthony Black would solve a lot of the issues on this team in terms of ball movement, continuity, defensive side of the court as well. Anthony Black, I think, is a steal at 8. I really, really like this kid right now. With where he currently sits on my big board, I have him in the top 6. And I feel very strongly about his capabilities as a passer. And I think if he continues to grow as a shooter, he's going to be really, really good. I think he's a bigger, slightly better Dereck White, honestly, which is a very good player to get 8th overall. Pick 9, Indiana Pacers here now. And with Tyrese Halliburton, with Miles Turner locked in, I like what this team has. Now I'm looking for a little bit of length, and I'm looking for a little bit more shooting because Indiana has a good amount of shooting right now, but you can never have enough shooting, especially around Tyrese Halliburton and Benedict Mathurin, to open up the lanes for Mathurin as a driver and to open up the passing windows for Halliburton as one of the best drive and kick guys in the league. Gradey Dick makes all the sense in the world. Gradey Dick at 6'8", he's got all the requisite size, length that you're looking for. Obviously pun intended there a little bit with Gradey Dick. And the one thing I have to say about him is he's more than just a shooter. And you think about some of the other shooters that have come into the draft in recent years, a guy that, you maybe think of like a Corey Kispert, for example. Gradey Dick is so much better than a Corey Kispert. There's not this low floor with Gradey Dick. He's able to get his shot off the bounce. He's able to run off of screens. I think he's a little bit more fluid of an athlete than a Corey Kispert. And one thing I have to really say about Gradey Dick, I'm going to have a scouting profile on him coming out soon, but he is so active offensively. He's willing to run off screens. He's willing to do all the stuff most movement shooters do. But when a shot goes up, 50-50, it seems like he's going to get the offensive board. And that's something that's really, really difficult to deal with for team defenses because you get used to running around with this guy all game long. You have to chase him through screens and everything. And he's one of the most dangerous guys. And oh, by the way, he's going to crash all the time and get a bunch of offensive boards. He's had a few putbacks this year for Kansas. He's had a bunch of nice tip-ins as well. And he just keeps possessions alive. And I think Indiana needs a little bit more of that. Wow, look at this guy just rebounding the heck out of the ball offensively. I think it gives them a nice little burst of athleticism next to Hield, next to Halliburton, next to Mathurin. Gradey Dick's a really good player. I could go on and on about this guy. I do really like his game. I think that, before the year, I think a lot of people were hesitant to put him as a top 10 player. I think defensively, he does have limitations. I think athletically, he's not the greatest athlete in the class by any means, but I mean, he's head and shoulders better than a guy like Dereck Whitehead right now, which not a lot of people would have expected coming into this year. So I really like Gradey Dick. I think he's going to have an awesome NBA career, and I think Indiana's getting a really good one here with this selection. Pick 10 now, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. This pick is the swap with the New Orleans Pelicans. And 10th overall, I kind of struggled with this pick for the Lakers with Gradey Dick off the board. Had Dick been available for them, he would have been the perfect selection to fit next to a Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt. Kind of gives you that hybrid forward wing type that I think the Lakers are still kind of lacking. Although this team is so much better now after the trade deadline. There's no question about that. They've done a nice job actually, prioritizing a rotation instead of 3 guys for the first time in quite a while. So the Lakers are in a better spot now than they were. They've been very competitive. They've been winning a lot of games lately. And I settled on Nick Smith Jr. here for them simply because of the upside and the talent. At 10th overall, you're kind of in a point where do you draft for need? Do you draft based off of upside, talent? What are you really looking for here? And I decided to land on talent with Nick Smith Jr., who's had somewhat of an up and down season for Arkansas. He's had some really bright moments where he scores 20 plus in a game super efficiently, and he looks like this surefire top 5, top 6 pick. And then there's games where he doesn't close out a game because Eric Musselman just doesn't trust him as much as, say, Ricky Council and Anthony Black. And to be honest, I understand it because, first of all, he's missed some time this year. He's dealt with a knee injury, which I think also should bump his stock down just a little bit. Doesn't diminish his talent, but it, presents a risk that maybe you won't have him available for 70 plus games this season, which is a concern. But 10th overall kind of feels like the right fit here for the Lakers. You look at him as the backup point guard on day one of his career behind D'Angelo Russell. And then this also gives the Lakers flexibility if, maybe they commit to Russell, and just like what happened in Golden State, what happened in Minnesota, what happened in Brooklyn, what happened in LA the first time, teams that commit to D'Angelo Russell typically don't stay committed too long. So I think Nick Smith Jr. could be the heir apparent. I think he would be a better long-term player than D'Angelo Russell. I think he's got better scoring capabilities and upside long-term, but I also think he's arguably a better playmaker than D'Lo has been. Obviously people are going to look at D'Lo's assists and say, whoa, you really believe that? Yeah, Nick Smith Jr. is not going to turn the ball over 4 times a game. That's just the way I feel about it. But I think that ultimately Nick Smith Jr. is going to be a nice player in the NBA. I think that, you give him some time to adjust to the NBA level. D'Lo's a nice, lead guard right now for you. Kind of can play on or off the ball next to LeBron. It works. But Nick Smith Jr., you're kind of looking at post LeBron. What do we have? Nick Smith Jr. gives you a lot more upside. I like this a lot for the Lakers. And it's kind of best case scenario, given the fact that he fell to 10 here in this mock. I think this is kind of where the floor would maybe be set for a Nick Smith Jr. type player, though. Pick 11, Orlando back on the clock. This pick comes from Chicago from that Nikola Vucevic trade, which I just have to say, since day one of that deal, I did not like it for Chicago. And you could argue it's panned out about as poorly as possible, especially with Lonzo's injury this year. I feel bad for the Bulls because, they have a good roster. They have a pretty good cast of players. But Lonzo was kind of that connecting piece that was supposed to tie everything together. And his absence has really kind of shown some of the flaws for Chicago, both offensively and defensively. But Orlando at this spot finds himself taking a guy in state, Taylor Hendricks from UCF, who, you ask me what position he's going to play in the NBA, I think maybe some small ball 5. I think a lot of power forward. And I think he's maybe skilled enough to play a little bit of small forward as well, which is rare. There's not a lot of guys that right now in this class, I'd say, I feel confident about them playing across 2, maybe 2.5, 3 positions. Taylor Hendricks is one of those guys I feel very confident about that. He's a very good shot blocker, rim protector type. He's got great timing on that end of the court, especially protecting the rim. But he's got a good wing type body at about 6'9". He's able to move laterally. He does a good job staying in front of people when he's defending out on the perimeter. He gave Jarace Walker some real issues this year in a matchup between UCF and Houston. Remember, we had Jarace Walker go 6th overall. This is the highest I've had Hendricks go in one of my mock drafts at 11th, but it feels right to me. You think about Orlando already having drafted Amen Thompson. We get another versatile player here who is athletic, can protect the rim, but can also step out and shoot the 3 ball very well. For most of the season, Taylor Hendricks was shooting above 40% from 3, which is a huge positive. Had that number, been 35%, I think his draft stock is significantly lower. But with where that number finished the season at, teams are going to be very intrigued by his kind of 3-and-D potential, 3-and-D upside with athletic capabilities. There's a lot to like about Taylor Hendricks. I think Orlando gets a really good prospect here. Somebody who can help them. He'll fit in with their group. They like to play big. They like to play fast and athletic. They have that. And now they add a player who you can realistically see fitting next to a Wendell Carter, next to a Bull, next to a Paolo Banchero, a Franz Wagner, and Amen Thompson. And you have to really love the future there in Orlando. Pick 12, the Utah Jazz now at this spot in the draft. They actually have back-to-back picks here, 12 and 13, and they're going to get things started with Cason Wallace out of Kentucky, which is a very Danny Ainge type selection here. To be honest, if I had to give a comp for Cason Wallace, it'd probably be Marcus Smart. The defensive intangibles are through the roof. This guy knows how to play defense. This guy's a good team defender, but he's willing to get down in a stance, be a one-on-one stopper every once in a while. I think he's got, areas to grow in. There, I think he needs to play with a little bit more defensive balance. But Utah, I think, is the perfect landing spot for him. because there's not going to be a ton of pressure on him right away to be this offensive go-to guy, especially with Lauri Markkanen's performance this year. Shout out to Lauri, man. It's been incredible watching this guy play this season. Just an unprecedented jump in his career that I don't think, even looking at how he played for Finland this past year in the summer, I don't think people would have expected that to continue through an 82-game season. It has. His efficiency's skyrocketed. Utah's future is so bright. Him, Walker Kessler, or should I say Blocker Kessler, and then now you add Cason Wallace, who again is a kind of one of those dogs. Like honestly, with the way he defends, there's just a lot of love that I have for a guy like him, because he's able to get down in a stance, get stops, but he understands defensive rotations. He knows when he has to hedge or chuck. He knows when he has to slip in to be a help guy. And for guards, it's kind of rare to have that good defensive feel. Cason Wallace has it, and he's a home run pick here for Utah, 12th overall. He's a guy I considered much higher. And honestly, if I was a team, I'd probably draft him in the top 10. Pick 13, I have here at this spot Keyonte George for Utah. And you might say, wow, so you're going back-to-back guards here for the Jazz. And part of the reason for that is with what Utah currently has on their roster, how it's currently constructed. The only thing I feel confident about them holding on to long-term is their two big front court players, Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen. So I think, okay, let's add a couple guards in there, give them some guys that they can rely on. I know Colin Sexton's been a pretty solid player for them this year as well. Then you kind of have that trio of guards that I think you can probably count on being there long-term. Now, we'll see what happens with Jordan Clarkson, right? There's room for him to stay. But I think that Utah, what they really need to prioritize is adding players with talent and adding good defensive players. We already addressed the defensive side of the ball with Cason Wallace, who I think has some offensive upside. But now we get a real big-time potential boom-type offensive player here in Keyonte George, who can really fill it up, especially when he's hot. He's one of the better bucket getters in this year's draft. He had a pretty nice season for Baylor. Obviously, their year is now concluded after a tough loss in the NCAA tournament. But this pick coming from Minnesota, that trade already looks like a home run for the Utah Jazz. A lot of people did not like that trade for Minnesota when it happened. And Keyonte George is now the benefactor of that, going to Utah, where he's going to have an opportunity to play a lot early in his career. I think Will Hardy's a good young coach, and I think Utah is building something really special. Pick 14, the Toronto Raptors here now. I have Gigi Jackson being the selection here, and I know Raptors fans are going to maybe be a little perplexed by this. I think Keyonte George would have been the perfect fit at this pick for what Toronto probably likely needs to add and would like to add. But I do have some current concerns as well about some of the other guards available at this spot. And I think the one thing about Masai Ujiri is he's not going to draft based off of the conventional positional need. I think back to a few drafts ago, most Raptors fans were begging for Jalen Suggs, saying, well, Kyle Lowry's an expiring contract. He's going to free agency. We need a new guard. Jalen Suggs is lighting up college. And I understood all of that, but I had this feeling that, fourth overall is going to be Scotty Barnes. And that's who they ultimately took, even though positionally that wasn't what they needed, right? Well, they made the right decision. Scotty Barnes is so much better than Jalen Suggs. I think everyone would agree with that. And I think that Gigi Jackson, athletically and upside-wise, maybe one of the higher upside players in this draft. He's one of the youngest players, if not the youngest player in this year's draft. He's able to make shots off the bounce at about 6'9". He's very athletic. He's kind of your typical offensive power forward that you put him in the league, more spacing, more shooting around him, he's going to find success. Now, he did have a negative assist to turnover ratio this year. He shot sub 40% from the field. There are some concerns with him, which is why he's not a surefire top 10 pick. I see some people talking about him as a guy who they think should go top 10. I also do know that some scouts, some executives view him as a guy who maybe he's going to be a little bit closer to 20 than he is 10. Now, typically as the kind of draft process progresses here, we see guys like him climb a little bit because he's going to impress some people at the combine. Athletically in one-on-one drills, he's going to look very good. And because of that, I think he's going to cement himself as either a late lottery pick or an early outside of the lottery selection. So I don't think he's going to go in the 20s. I think he'll go anywhere from 12 to 18 with probably a little bit closer to that 12 range. But Toronto gets a good player here who, yes, conventionally doesn't fit their needs, but is a good player, and Masai Ujiri knows what he's doing with the draft. Going on to pick 15 now, we look at the Atlanta Hawks here, who, it's been a really up and down season for them. They've had some serious struggles this year. And after trading for DeJounte Murray, I know there was a lot of expectations for this team to take a big step forward. I think that one of my concerns about them is Trae Young off the ball, like his off-ball movement, willingness to set screens, which would really be what unlocks their offense. I think it's going to be a lot of pressure, honestly, on Quinn Snyder to figure everything out. Now, Quinn Snyder's one of the coaches that I would want to sign up for if I was a GM. I think Quinn Snyder knows what he's doing. I think he's a very smart guy. I do like the direction of Atlanta just in terms of their roster and their now coach in Quinn Snyder. I think that they have a good pairing. And I think that they need some more stability, some more constant pieces. And a guy like Kris Murray is an example of that. Obviously, the brother of Keegan Murray, who's had an awesome, outstanding rookie season for the Sacramento Kings. And I think Kris Murray, probably a guy we really need to start talking about as a potential lottery pick. In my mocks, he's typically ranged from anywhere around 15 to 25. I think maybe that's a little low. I would not be shocked at all if this guy ends up moving into the lottery just with how well Keegan's played this year, plus how well Kris himself's played for Iowa this year. Took a massive step forward for the Hawkeyes, ended up being a 20-plus point per game scorer for them. He's been fantastic. Defensively, you could see him playing probably the 3 or the 4 at the NBA level. He's going to be able to knock down the outside shot. And that's really, if you're looking at getting a player at 15 in the draft and he's able to knock down open shots, defend across multiple positions, and be a smart, willing passer, that's a lot of the things you're hoping to land. And Kris Murray's able to do all of those things. I can't get over how loaded this draft class is. This is probably one of the best draft classes in the last 25 years. Just point blank, the top end talent with Scoot, Victor, Brandon Miller is incredible. The depth in this draft is incredible as well. There's going to be multiple guys who are drafted outside of the lottery that have serious, cases to be long-term NBA starters or long-term guys who could maybe make some all-star appearances even. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of good players in this draft, and I think Kris Murray is one of the kind of prototypes of that in this year's class. Pick 16, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder looking at Kyle Filipowski, and now this is going to be maybe a little surprising for Thunder fans who at this point of the year are probably a little bit more focused on, making the playoffs, which is an awesome situation for them. Oklahoma City, I said it all last year. I said, I think the Thunder are a lot closer than people expect. Now drafting Jalen Williams definitely helped go a long way in terms of taking that next step forward. He's been so good down this stretch run for Oklahoma City. Very happy for them. And you might say, well, why Kyle Filipowski here? I know a lot of Thunder fans really like the idea of Jarace Walker. Well, with how much they've been winning, they probably pulled themselves out of the Jarace Walker kind of race at this point. But Kyle Filipowski makes sense for me, given what Sam Presti's looking to do with this roster. 3 words: dribble, pass, shoot. Sam Presti's looking to build a team that has a vast collection of players who can play out on the perimeter in 4-out or 5-out spacing and be able to take guys off the dribble, play out of the high pick and roll, play in spread situations with the court spaced out, drive and kick. Let's move the ball around. Let's play as a team, and let's pass everyone to death. And that's what they're going to do. Kyle Filipowski, if you watch Duke at all this year, he was so heavily involved offensively for that team. He was a guy that they looked to get him the ball all the time at the high spot of the floor and spread pick and roll with Dereck Lively down by the dunker spot. They would try and get him the ball and say, okay, go to work, Kyle Filipowski. And for the most part, he did. He had a very nice freshman season for them. He led all freshmen in the NCAA in double doubles as well, which is very impressive. He's I believe about 6'11", about 230 pounds. So he's got a good frame to him as well. And you think about kind of the role Mike Muscala played for Oklahoma City. Well, you're getting maybe a better long-term offensive player than Mike Muscala in Kyle Filipowski, who I think can do a little bit more dribble, pass, and shoot. Maybe not as much shooting as Muscala at this point of his career, but I think there's a lot of room for him to grow into that. You'd think about not only adding 1 near 7-footer, but you're technically adding 2 with Chet Holmgren being a rookie next season as well. OKC is going to be really, really scary a year from now. Pick 17, we move on to the Golden State Warriors, and there's that Duke Blue Devil running mate, Dereck Lively, 17th overall to Golden State. This is kind of a redemption opportunity for Golden State on the whole James Wiseman situation, with the fact that Dereck Lively, we could realistically see him go anywhere from maybe 10th to 20th in this year's draft. I think there's a pretty wide range at this point on where we could see him go. He's got a very, very good defensive IQ. I think he really understands how to defend out in space. He's extremely lengthy at about 7'1", and offensively, he understands his role, specifically with his willingness to play around the rim. I think he would have been very benefited at Duke by one more playmaker, specifically as a guard, somebody who could be a little bit more dynamic downhill. I know Tyrese Proctor this year had moments. Jeremy Roach obviously played very well this year, but I'm thinking more like an Anthony Black type player, somebody who, you know, could have, out of a spread pick and roll, put the ball up in the air. And Dereck Lively, with his incredible reach, his ability to go and catch basketballs that you think there's no way he's getting to that one, that's really his bread and butter. He's a freak athlete. He's a good screener. He understands how to operate and dribble handoffs. He's got a lot more experience at the collegiate level than James Wiseman did. And I think for Golden State, he fits perfectly into their offense as a guy who, you know, he's going to understand that, oh, the moment I catch this ball on the three-point line, I need to give this off as a grenade handoff to either Clay or Poole or Steph. And that's going to make Golden State very difficult to defend, especially with how athletic he is rolling downhill. And I think the next step for him as a development piece is, how can he pass the basketball, catching the ball in the short roll? And that's really where Golden State's going to be able to take, you know, him and hopefully develop him. Unlike what they did with Wiseman, we need to see some actual growth from Dereck Lively, but I think it's very likely that Golden State would be a great landing spot for him. Pick 18, the New York Knicks here now. And with this pick, I have them going with Dariq Whitehead, who I referenced a little bit earlier when I was talking about Grady Dick. Dariq Whitehead, his high school film was so incredible. He was the National High School Player of the Year last season. And I thought, wow, he's going to step in this year for the Blue Devils, and he's going to be remarkable. Funny enough, I just realized 3 Blue Devils go in a row here in this mock draft. That was not intentional. But I think New York at this spot, very likely they would actually trade this pick down. That's been kind of their MO. They've been trying to stack up all of their assets. So a team wanting to move up here realistically could go out and buy this draft pick using future selections to go get it. Dariq Whitehead would be a very nice gift for any team, but specifically for New York, I targeted him because his bread and butter is his jump shot. Now, I know it kind of wavered this year for Duke. I think part of that was the spacing. I also don't think he got to play with a lot of consistency or timing. He came off the bench for a vast majority of the year. I don't think he ever found himself in a rhythm. He missed the beginning of the year for Duke. So there was a lot of things that kind of hindered his potential performance. And because of that, he's slid way down boards. To begin the year, my first mock draft, which was one day after the NBA draft this past year, I talked about him as a potential top 5 pick. Now, pick 18 is significantly lower than that because, you know, he just didn't have the year that I was hoping for him to have as a freshman. But I still think there's a lot of upside. I still think that his shot making, his ability to shoot the 3 ball specifically, his shooting with balance is all there. So I think for New York, if they do stick here, they need another guy who can knock down the 3 ball and you know, knock down dribble pull-ups, those kind of things off of screens as well. He's, again, plays with good balance. So that's really what I'm looking for in him. I still think he's a guy worth a top 20 to 25 pick in this year's draft. It's just about finding the team that's the right fit for him, and hopefully him finding some consistent minutes and a consistent role early in his NBA career to really stick. Pick 19, the Houston Rockets. Now, this pick comes from the Los Angeles Clippers in the swap trade that they made surrounding Eric Gordon on the day of the NBA trade deadline. And I have them going with Jalen Wilson here out of Kansas, which is probably the highest I've had him go all year long in one of my mock drafts. He was such a consistent force for the Jayhawks, though, this year that I do think he does deserve some love and credit for the season he had. Seems like every game he was putting up 19 and 8. And not that that's how he's going to play at the NBA level, but he did so with good, strong physicality. You could tell he was a nice, mature presence for Kansas this year, specifically with how the season unfolded for them. He was their go-to guy for a vast majority of the year. Obviously, tough end to the season in their loss to Arkansas. But I do think that Jalen Wilson's going to have a pretty solid NBA career ahead of him. And now with the addition of both Scoot Henderson, Jalen Wilson, I think that Houston's in the process of adding some good veteran talent with the cap space that they have. I think that they're also going to add some mature presences. Scoot Henderson, who's been playing basically now professional basketball for about 2 years. You look at Jalen Wilson, who he's kind of a pro's pro at the collegiate level at this point. So I think 19th overall is a pretty good landing spot for him. And Houston, after going point guard early in this draft, I do think that they need to address the wing spot and find a wing like Jalen Wilson. Pick 20 of the Miami Heat here now. And with this pick for Miami, I'm looking at Trayce Jackson-Davis out of Indiana. Clearly, the Kyle Lowry thing has not aged well for Miami since signing him. And I do think that Jalen Hood-Schifino is one of the better options for them at this spot, specifically as kind of a prototypical NBA guard. He's very adept in the pick and roll. He's able to make good cross-court passes. You think about him driving right, finding a guy in the left wing, left corner. He's got better pass range than a lot of other players kind of around this range, which is why he's worth a selection at this spot. There's not a lot of guys 20th overall that you can find that you'd say, yeah, we kind of feel good about him maybe running our offense in, the back end of year one or maybe the start of year two of his NBA career. I think that's what he can become. Now, when you're drafting point guards, you usually want to draft them a year or two before you really need them, because it gives them time to develop and kind of, grow into the role that you want them to play, unless you're drafting right at the top of the draft. Miami doesn't have that luxury this year. They went with Jovic last year, who I think was a good pick, but now they have to find their point guard of the future, and they have to do it pretty quickly. I think that Hood-Schifino, there's a lot of pressure on him day one if he lands in Miami, but I think he's one of the few guards that's maybe up to that challenge quickly into his career. Pick 21, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick comes from the Phoenix Suns in the Kevin Durant trade. And the Nets, I have been going with Bryce Sensabaugh. It's been awesome to see Mikal Bridges play for the Brooklyn Nets. It's been incredible seeing him in a bigger role where he's been able to shine offensively more. I know Spencer Dinwiddie's had some awesome moments this year as well. Since landing back in Brooklyn again, obviously Nets fans, I'm sure you guys love him there because he's spent a good amount of his career there and he's been a really nice contributor for them. And if the Nets don't move their picks, though, I still think that they're looking for one more offensive scoring piece. And kind of funny enough, we've seen Malachi Branham this year for San Antonio grow into that pro scoring role for the Spurs. And I think that realistically, another Ohio State Buckeye this year, Bryce Sensabaugh, has a similar game, similar upside to him where he can step in and probably year one give you consistency as an offensive scorer. There's not a lot of rookies who can do that. And I think that Bryce Sensabaugh is going to be one of those few guys who's able to. And Brooklyn, I think, badly needs it. Even with the positives that Mikal Bridges has given you offensively, it's just really tough to replace Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on that end of the court. I think the Nets have a good variety of pieces. I think that they're going to line themselves up to make a bunch of trades this summer, at least one or two. But if they do keep these picks, Bryce Sensabaugh is the first guy I see them going with. And then second, pick 22, I see them going with a guy like Noah Clowney. There's been a ton of positives this year for Brooklyn, even with the whole Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant blow up. You think about everything that we've seen play out. Nick Claxton's been one of the most improved players this year. I actually highlighted him this past season, last year, going into the offseason as one of my picks for likely most improved player. And I think that there's, a good chance that he's their long-term starting center, and he should be, right? But I still think that they need a little bit more rebounding help, specifically off the bench, a backup big like Noah Clowney, who I think the league is perfect for Noah Clowney right now. He's a little undersized, but he's somewhat mobile. I think he's going to be able to survive in the pick and roll defensively, although he's not going to block a ton of shots. He's got a huge high energy motor, and that's awesome for a backup big in the NBA. Someone who wants to go out there and rebound the heck out of the basketball. Those guys are very, very important. Alabama this year has really relied on Noah Clowney at moments to be their big energy, go get the basketball type guy. He's done that for them. And he's also stepped out behind the 3-point line and knocked down a ton of shots for Nate Oates, who, really believes in, hey, let's take a lot of threes and let's take shots at the rim. Noah Clowney's fit in perfectly to that, which is very similar to the NBA style. So I think Noah Clowney's going to have a nice role in the NBA early. He's going to be willing to shoot threes. And I think if he grows into his body a little bit, kind of hits the weight room, gets a little bit stronger, he could be a nice little backup big for a majority of his career and maybe even find some, starting opportunities a little bit later on as well. Pick 23, This is one of my favorite bigs in the entire draft. Trayce Jackson-Davis. I love this player, and I love him as a draft prospect. Now, this is one of my more unlikely picks in this mock draft. It's very likely that Trayce Jackson-Davis, as a fourth-year senior, does not get drafted in the first round. But, I've been pushing him out of the first round all year long. I needed to talk about him in a video. I needed to claim him as one of my guys. I love this guy as a prospect. He is only 6'9". He's not the biggest guy, but he's extremely mobile. He's extremely athletic. He's one of the best shot blockers in this year's draft. He's got incredible shot blocking timing. Plus, he's one of the best passing big men in this year's draft as well, if not the best passing big man in this year's draft. He would be perfect in Golden State, and if Golden State had the guts to take him in the first round, I would be all in on it, because I think their post-split series is built essentially for a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis, who already does a ton of that for Mike Woodson at Indiana. Now, Portland's getting a really good player here because, first of all, I think that they need the athleticism at the big man position. I've been really preaching defense and passing and playmaking for this team. Think about adding Anthony Black and Trayce Jackson-Davis. You get two guys who can pass the basketball. You get two defensively versatile players who can, play at the level of the screen, be good team help defenders, do a bunch of different stuff. And by the way, they're both pretty lengthy, athletic, and smart. And that's the thing is that I think Portland's missing around Damian Lillard right now. They need more smart players. They need more team-oriented players. And they're getting two of them, Anthony Black, Trayce Jackson-Davis, who, by the way, he's averaging 20 and 10 this year, but with 4 assists a game and even more hockey assists, which has really been one of the key components of Indiana's offense. Pick 24, the Memphis Grizzlies here now. I have them going with Brandon Podziemski, player I really like out of Santa Clara. He has had an awesome season after transferring out of Illinois last year. Going into his sophomore season, there was a lot of pressure on him, not only to step up for his own game, but also going into Santa Clara, who, just lost Jalen Williams to the NBA draft last year. Well, not only did he step up, he stepped up big time. He's had a better season this year than Jalen Williams had last year for Santa Clara. And I think he's got a very similar offensive skill set. Now, I don't think he's quite as athletic. I don't think he's quite as good defensively as Jalen Williams, which is maybe one of the limitations on where his draft range is maybe going to go. I think as we get closer and closer to the draft, though, it's very possible we see Brandon accelerate into a lottery level type draft pick in terms of where his draft consideration trends. And I think it's well warranted. I have this guy very high on my board right now. I'm a big believer in his game. He's kind of the epitome of dribble, pass, shoot in this year's draft as a player who's able to do a bunch of different stuff. He comes off a lot of different zoom action type plays for Santa Clara. Sets him up going downhill. He's a good facilitator. He's a good offensive rebounder for his position. He's also able to play through contact. He's got a very nice floater. He's a left-handed sniper. Honestly, I think Santa Clara, I think that they call him the left-handed curly assassin, which is kind of a funny name, but he's an incredible player. I think that he's going to have a very nice career at the NBA level. I think offensively, he's similar to Luke Kennard as a shooter, but I think he's got way more passing upside. I think he's a lot more competent as a ball handler. So that's where I think that, Memphis right now, who obviously brought in Luke Kennard, you're looking to add a little bit more shooting, a little bit more dribble, pass, shoot, especially as Dylan Brooks goes into a contract year. I think this offseason, Memphis sets themselves up well by drafting Brandon Podziemski 24th overall. 25th, we have the Sacramento Kings here now, who I have going with Jett Howard. I think for Sacramento, what they're really looking for is a little bit more wing help, especially in this year's draft. You feel good about the point guard position. De'Aaron Fox, clutch player of the year. He's been incredible. Domantas Sabonis should get serious all-NBA consideration. I believe he's still leading the league in rebounds. He's had such a good year running out of the high post with their corner-cutting offense that Mike Brown's installed there. They've had a very good season. Keegan Murray was a home run for them in terms of his fit. Harrison Barnes is headed towards free agency. I'm sure that they would love to extend him, keep him around. Malik Monk was a stealing of a signing. I just think that they're looking for kind of one more wing. I think that Lyle stays around as the backup 5, and I think that they look to add a Jett Howard type player who can do a little bit of his own dribble pass shoot. Now, he's not as good of a shooter as Podziemski, not even close. He's not nearly, I think, as well-rounded as a facilitator, but there's been inklings and growth in his game pretty much every single month that I think he should still be considered a first-round level pick. I think Sacramento gets a good player here who maybe year one, you can't rely on him playing 20 minutes a night, but he'll give you 10 to 15 minutes a night. And I think that he's someone who by year 2, year 3 of his career, get him in an NBA weight room, he gets in a little bit better shape. I think he's going to have a really nice career ahead of him. And Sacramento does well drafting him here at this spot. Pick 26, the Pacers back on the board after going with Grady Dick earlier, find themselves going with Ryan Rupert here. And I know Pacers fans are desperate for a ton of wing additions and acquisitions this summer. And I think already starting off with 2 of them here, Grady Dick and Ryan Rupert, is a very, very good way to start. I think Rupert would be a very nice addition for this team with his defensive upside. Now, we talked about some of Grady Dick's defensive limitations. Ryan Rupert's got a lot of offensive limitations right now. I don't think he's very comfortable going to his left hand. I think right now his jump shot's a little shaky. I don't think that, I've seen some people talking about him as a potential lottery level pick. I just don't really see it this year. I think that he's a guy who's going to go in the 20s, but I think that that's warranted. And I think that's a worthwhile pick because I think there's a lot of upside for him to grow into. I think he's a solid playmaker. I think he understands and sees the floor. I just don't know if he has the technical skill to fully do everything that he's seeing yet, which is why this is okay for Indiana. They've got time for him to, develop, probably plays with Fort Wayne for a while, but that's a-okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Indiana adds a player who has a good long-term development upside. I think that Rick Carlisle is going to need to be patient with him, which I think is good. Rick Carlisle typically doesn't play rookies a ton, but, he kind of gave the keys to Benedict Mathurin. Maybe he's changing his ways a little bit, but I think Rupert defensively, if you're looking at what Indiana needs to add long-term, it's shooting and defense and guys who fit around Halliburton. And I think Rupert is someone who gives you that defense, gives you the athleticism you're hoping to add, and there's upside for him to grow into more, which is really why Indiana would maybe make this pick at 26. 27, the Charlotte Hornets on the clock again after going with Cam Whitmore at 7. Now stick in state with NC State's own Terquavion Smith, which maybe feels low for a lot of people looking at this in the mock. Kind of last year, this is kind of the range we would have thought he would go. People thought, oh, coming back sophomore year, he's going to jump up. He just efficiency-wise, did not have the season a lot of people were hoping to see from him. A lot of sub 40% shooting nights. Now, he had some monster performances as well where, the efficiency was through the roof. And you think, wow, this might be one of the best pro-ready scorers in this year's draft. And I think there's a good argument for that. I think he comes as a bench type player. I think he's a role player off the bench, kind of an electricity piece, kind of a guy who, okay, we're going to put him in for, 7-8 minutes here and see what he can give us offensively. And Charlotte, I think, needs that. Charlotte has a lot of needs right now. So I think Terquavion Smith, who I could see having a real, true, solidified role coming into the league as a, bench spark plug, makes a lot of sense. And off the bench, he's going to give you buckets. I think he's going to be able to score 12 to 14 points a night throughout his NBA career, certain seasons. So that's something that you can already cross off the checklist if you're Charlotte and say, okay, when LaMelo's out, we have a guy like Terquavion Smith who can go in and kind of carry our offense, run the show for us a little bit as a lead scorer. I like it. Now, he's got a little bit of Bones Highland to him where he's not going to turn down open shots. We'll put it that way. And, does that mean he's going to be inefficient some nights? Definitely does mean that. But overall, I think Charlotte's going to be in a really good spot where you had a player like Terquavion Smith. You addressed an athletic wing earlier in Cam Whitmore. You come back, find a bench spark plug. Your team's looking better going into next season. Pick 28, I have the Indiana Pacers here now going with Jordan Hawkins, which maybe doesn't feel as much of a need for this team, but I think it's more of an upside play on what he could potentially become. He's had a very nice season this year for UConn as a scorer. Now, I really do not like him as a slasher. I think that he struggles around the rim mightily. I think he, in year one of his NBA career, would be one of the worst rim finishers in the NBA around shot blockers. I just don't think that he has any semblance of concentration or focus on the rim while finishing. I think he plays off of 1 foot too much with no balance. I think that there's moments where he's not even looking at the rim trying to score, and he's not Michael Jordan, so he doesn't get away with it. But offensively, his perimeter skill set is impressive. He's got a nice handle. He's got a very good step back jump shot, specifically from three. There's things to like. Now, I think he's going to be somebody who his first year in the league, he's going to be mostly scoring in the G League, and he'll be scoring a lot in the G League. He's going to be able to score 20 to 25 a night down there. Kind of think about how Bryce McGowan started the year for Charlotte. Kind of funny now we're talking about Indiana, and I think Jordan Hawkins has a similar pathway, similar trajectory in which he's going to mostly spend time down in the G League to start. And for Indiana, you're hoping that, okay, maybe this is a home run pick, and maybe this turns out in a way that, we don't have a ton of needs right now. We're not really worried about trying to win this season. So I think Jordan Hawkins becomes a pretty good addition for them as a long-term developmental play. You say, okay, Ryan Rupert, Jordan Hawkins, what can you guys be 2, 3, 4 years from now for us? Which I know is not the most fun thing for fans. You're not going to see them a lot year one, but I think it's really healthy, especially after drafting Gradey Dick, who's going to be a big-time contributor for them year one, to, take some longer developmental pieces and say, okay, let's hope that these guys can blossom and turn into really good contributors for us a few years from now when we're really hitting our stride with the Halliburton, Mathurin, Gradey Dick trio. That I think that they would be really good. Pick 29, Utah, back on the clock for their third draft pick in this year's class. And I have them going with Dylan Mitchell out of Texas. Big reason why is I think he's a souped up Jared Vanderbilt, more athletic, more, I think, offensive upside, is a putback machine, guy who I think could probably grow as a shooter earlier in his career than Vanderbilt did. Now, it's going to take a lot of work. Dylan Mitchell has not shown a lot of those things yet. So am I saying, oh, Dylan Mitchell's a lock to be this great NBA player? No, but I'm saying he understands how to play in a role. We know that Utah made it work very well with Jared Vanderbilt. They found success with that type of role player in their system, next to Lauri Markkanen, next to Walker Kessler, next to Colin Sexton, next to Jordan Clarkson. We know that adding a younger, more athletic version of him would not destroy this team at all. In fact, I think there'd be a lot of positives from it, including more offensive rebounding, more second chance opportunities, and I think a versatile long-term defender who can defend maybe 2 through 4, which is pretty fun, and I think gives you a guy who you can throw out a variety of different wings in the league, which is something you need. He's athletic, he's quick, but he's also lengthy and has a good frame to him. Dylan Mitchell, I think, is a player who a lot of people are starting to really sleep on. I understand that there's limitations. He did not impress this year in the way that a lot of people were hoping to see him impress, but physically, role style wise, there's still a fit for him in this league. Then 30th overall, I have the Los Angeles Clippers here. This pick comes from the Houston Rockets via comes from the Milwaukee Bucks, via Houston in that swap around Eric Gordon. And I have them here going with Emoni Bates out of Eastern Michigan. For me, he just still feels like a back end of the first round type player, a guy who you look at all of the advanced data on his, where he ranks in terms of, shooting efficiency, and pretty much every single set of data you look at in terms of advanced numbers suggests that this guy's going to be able to score at the NBA level. And I believe it. The eye test backs it up. When he has his feet set, he's one of the most pure shooters in this year's draft. He's also got an incredible first step. He's extremely quick. Now he's got a negative wingspan. Defensively, he's really, really raw right now. He needs a lot of coaching. And is he going to be willing to buy into a team-oriented role? Those are all the questions on Emoni Bates. And I understand him. He really struggled his first year at Memphis. But if you compare his numbers his first year at Memphis to Gigi Jackson's first year at South Carolina, I think you'll be a little surprised. And remember where we talked about Gigi Jackson getting drafted in this year's class. I think Emoni Bates could be a nice steal here, 30th overall. The Clippers are a type of team that we've seen do this in the past. They did this with Brandon Boston in the second round, and it wouldn't be shocking to me to see them maybe make a stab at a guy like Emoni Bates to end the first round this season. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this mock draft. Obviously, a lot of other content on the channel. Make sure to go check it out. We've also started recently posting shorts covering, NBA set plays, which I think is pretty fun as well. So I hope you're enjoying all the content. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy this mock. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.